Welcome, everyone. I'm Hayley Hanson. I'm the leader of the higher education team here at Husch Blackwell. We're happy to have you with us today. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console, you're going to find multiple application icons for your use during the program today. Specifically, if you have a question, you can put it in the question box at the bottom of your console. We're going to try to answer questions today to the best that we can, again, since it's a new law that we're talking about. And if for some reason we need to connect with you after the webinar, we will do so as well. We can reach out and give you additional information, or if time runs out, answer your question. Also, there is a PDF of the presentation, which is available in the program materials folder at the bottom of your console as well. Audio generated closed captioning is available for the program today. To turn on the closed captions, you can click the CC button, and it is on the bottom right corner of the media player box, so if you need to turn that on. The program has been approved for continuing legal education hours. For live attendees, you want to report your hours by using this CEU icon at the bottom of the screen. A certificate of attendance will be sent to you after the webinar, and also you will receive tomorrow a recording of the webinar in case there's anyone who was unable to attend today but you think would benefit from the information at your campus. So feel free to pass that on as well. At the end of the program, also, we would ask you to complete a short survey. We use your feedback to try to plan our future webinars of things that you're interested in or things that you would like us to cover. And as you know, we typically have 1 to 2 webinars per month. Other than, I think, in December, we don't do as many, but we're happy to kind of make sure that we're meeting your needs in terms of things that you're interested to talk about during our webinars. All right, well, that's all for our housekeeping items. So let's go ahead and start with our program. Today, we are discussing the Stop Campus Hazing Act, which was signed into law on December 24th of 2024, and amends the Clery Act. And we're going to go into quite a bit of detail today, but we have Ellen Armentrout, who is joining us today as a speaker. Ellen is a senior counsel in our education group here at Husch Blackwell, and her current practice consists of working with clients regarding a variety of compliance issues, but she really specializes in the Clery Act. And so she is a huge resource for us here at Husch when it comes to Clery questions and to our clients as well. And so she does a lot of other compliance work, including VAWA and Title IX, and also advises frequently on public records requests. So glad that Ellen is joining me today. And as we go through today, Ellen and I may go back and forth and talk about some of the issues, as well as some of these things we don't have a lot of guidance on, since this is completely new. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about the, well, I already introduced ourselves, but talk about our agenda today. So first, we're going to talk about just the background of the Stop Campus Hazing Act, and then we're going to go into the definitions. And the definitions are really important. And, as you start looking at, okay, what do we need to do on our campuses? Those definitions are going to be extremely important in your planning. We're also going to talk about policy statements, statistical reporting, the ASR, your policy statements, and then the Campus Hazing Transparency Report that's talked about within the Act as well. And then at the end, we're going to try to give you some just tips of what you need to know so that you can be in compliance. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our background section and really talk about the Stop Campus Hazing Act. So again, as I said earlier, signed into law on Christmas Eve, December 24th, by President Biden. It amends the Higher Education Act of 1965, in particular, the portion of the act that is known as the Clery Act. And it includes various implementation dates for different statutory requirements. So we're going to talk about this, but understand that since it's been signed into law, January, so right now is when you have to start collecting this information. So we are, if things happen on campus, this is the time that you really need to look at that. So we do understand and recognize that there's a new administration that's taken over next week, and that we're hearing a lot from the new administration as to how they will handle particular issues. But when it comes to Clery, Clery has really had bipartisan support since its inception in 1990. And each president has really supported the Clery Act. And so we don't think that there's going to be any difference when it comes to the second term of President Trump. And in fact, he and the department were very focused on the Clery Act during the first term. In fact, as you know, they were that's when the 2016 Clery handbook was actually rescinded, was during the first term of President Trump. And during that term, also, it was very clear that they wanted you to look at the statutory language. And so a lot less what we refer to as sub-regulatory guidance. So guidance from the Department of Education itself through Dear Colleague letters or the Clery handbook, and really wanted you to focus on the law itself. And in fact, the Supreme Court this summer, and the Loper decision, eliminated the Chevron doctrine, which actually would provide deference to the administrative rulemaking process and the regulations. And so as we look at the act itself today, we're going to really try to break down the language of the act, because as we've seen that the changes within even the last 6 to 12 months, it's going to be clear that there's going to be less information provided or guidance regarding enforcement provided by the Department of Education, and advice basically to schools to say you really need to look at the language of the statute and follow the language of the statute. All right, so let's kind of get into a little bit of some of the important points. First of all, this is the first federal law that addresses hazing. And I think that's really important, because we have lots of states, and you may be in a state that has their own hazing laws, but there's not been a federal uniform approach to hazing or the definitions of hazing, which may be different than your state law definitions of hazing as well. And that's going to be really important for you to understand. Also, name change to the Clery Act, the Janine Clery Safety Act. The name change is another important point that has occurred as well. Okay, so let's talk about what does this law do. So what does the Stop Campus Hazing Act actually do? So it defines, and I must say very broadly, the definition of hazing. And we now have a common baseline. And, again, we've had states that can be more restrictive in their laws, but now we have a federal law that is going to be the baseline for where we are going to need to go with when it comes to hazing and reporting, not only under the Clery Act, under the ASR, but this separate reports as well that we're going to have as potentially if you have findings on your campus. It also defines student organizations, and it defines them in more than one way. So it's going to be really important during this webinar to really key in on student organizations and the fact that they mean different things to different portions of the statute. There is one definition for the ASR and your reporting that you do through the Department of Education, and there is another definition for the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, which we're going to get into in much more detail, and Ellen will kind of walk us through the finer points of that during the webinar. The other thing that it does is it creates policy statement requirements. So hazing will need to be included in the institution's statistical reporting because hazing is now defined by statute and is considered to be a Clery crime. So you will have to add a column for hazing in your statistical reporting table for your ASR, and the department, presumably by August, will likely change its portal to include hazing and reporting for hazing as well. You will also need to include additional policy statements in your ASR regarding hazing, and you will need to have additional programming. And we talk about programming, we're talking about educational programming. And so there's going to need to be additional education that you provide. Now, a lot of campuses that we work with already have definitions of hazing within their student conduct or code of conduct, and also do some training regarding that. This is going to be a little bit different, and we're going to talk to you about the finer points of what needs to be included in those definitions, and then how that needs to be included in your annual security report as well. And remember, for policy statements with your ASR, it's the policy statement at the time the ASR is published. So October 1st of 2025, you'll need to include the policy statements that are some may be new or have changed to comply with this law, and those will need to be included in your ASR for this year. And finally, again, you'll need to report those, the additional report information on the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, and we're going to break that down of what does that look like as well. So let's launch our first poll question today for you and ask you, does your institution currently have a separate hazing policy? Yes, I'm familiar with it is A. B, yes, but I don't know exactly where it is or what it says. No, but it's on our list of things to do, or I'm not quite sure. So if you would go ahead and submit your answers to this. Let's see, there we go. As soon as we get about half of you that have responded, we'll show you the results. Okay, we got a little more than half, so I'll go ahead and show you the results. Okay, so I love the fact that almost 50% of you say, yes, you know where your hazing policy is and you're very familiar with it. So for those that are in the other categories, this is a really good time to take a look at those policies and not only understand, where they are on campus, but also to update those, because there's likely going to be things, especially in the definitions, that you are going to need to update based on the, this law passing. So, so let's talk about that. Let's really get into definitions. All right, so this is a really important slide, and I'm going to go through it slowly. So bear with me, please. But there's a lot of points that I want to make on this slide just to make sure that you're aware of them. So hazing is defined, hazing is an act that is intentional, knowing, or reckless. So that's broad. That is not a high standard if you have reckless behavior. Again, intentional can be a higher standard, but knowing or reckless. So basically, it's not hazing if it's an accident. So if something is accidental, but anything else could be considered to be hazing. And so this has implications for bystanders to hazing as well. It's a broad definition. Also committed by a person, and this is important, either alone or in concert with others. So an individual could be the reason that individuals are hazed. And that is going to be very important to understand. So it doesn't need, the act says it doesn't need to be committed by a group to be considered hazing. For example, so a social chair of a student organization goes rogue and creates a new initiation requirement without buy-in from the leadership. That could still be hazing if you have one single individual who is requiring, individuals to participate in the hazing. The next part of the definition, against another person or people, regardless of the other person's or people's willingness to participate. And this is going to be tricky, I think, and going to cause some gray areas for a lot of questions regarding hazing. So a person does not need to be forced to engage in a particular activity for it to be considered hazing. We've done investigations in the past where members of a particular team or a particular student organization were perfectly content to drink until they got sick in connection with a club initiation or event. They were willing participants. that doesn't matter now for the purpose of this definition. It still can be hazing. That still can be part of this definition, even if they've consented to drink or they've consented to be part of whatever this initiation or right is, or what is occurring. So the next part of the definition, in the course of an initiation into an affiliation with or to be part of a membership of some sort of student organization, and it causes a risk of physical or psychological injury. And so, again, let's kind of break this down. The definition is not limited to initiation activities. The law says that initiation, affiliation, or maintenance of a membership. So that's important, that it's much broader in its definition of hazing in the context. A lot of times we'll see initiation events or things like that, but it can be any types of activities. What does it mean to be affiliated? I think that's an affiliation with that student organization. That is another area that can be kind of broken down as well. So what if a single volleyball player dares another volleyball player to shoplift? Is that hazing? And the volleyball player does shoplift and is caught because they're both members of the volleyball team. And so it is, I think, I give you these examples to say, at least the way that the law is written, which is under the new administration, the Trump administration, what they want you to rely on, the way that the law is written, it is written very broadly. And so it is important for you to understand that as you're looking at incidents of hazing. And likely policies that I have seen campuses have are much narrower in scope than how this law is actually written in terms of its definition. And then the final factor, what is an acceptable level of risk in connection with somebody's physical or psychological injury? So the statute says that there must be above the reasonable risk encountered in the course of participating in an institution's higher education organization. So, but that's not that helpful, right? I mean, that it's above a reasonable risk. And what does that mean? So if a fraternity says that it's, let's say that it's pledges need to run 3 miles under 20 minutes, is that going to be judged as the same way that a cross-country coach would say that the cross-country team needs to run 3 miles under 20 minutes? And so these are all questions that we really don't have the answers to yet. And I think, hopefully additional information will be provided, but we need to make sure that when we talk about our training, when we talk about our policy statements, that our policy statements track the law and that they are understood that it's much broader than what you may in the past before this law was enacted, considered to be hazing. Now, I really did take a long time on that slide. I'm sorry. So I'll speed it up just a little bit more. So here are some examples within the what is hazing that were provided within the statute. So the first, obviously, if you have whipping, beating, hurting something, electroshock, placing a harmful substance in somebody's body, I think that's, we all think of that as hazing. The next one I think is really important, causing, coercing, or otherwise inducing sleep deprivation, exposure to the elements, confining someone in a small space, extreme calisthenics, or other type of similar activity is one of the examples used in the statute of hazing. And so as we talk about this, as we think about sleep deprivation, give the example of what's required for a medical student. Participation in medical school isn't maintenance of a membership in a student organization, but there are requirements that, could lead to sleep deprivation and those types of things. So, as you think about all these areas, there's a lot it's again, very, very broad, and you need to be aware of that as we look through these. So other examples, causing, coercing, or otherwise inducing a person to consume food, liquid, alcohol, drugs, or other substances, causing, coercing, or inducing a person to perform sexual acts, That's typically already in policies. Anything activity that would be a crime, any activity that places somebody in the reasonable fear of bodily harm, and other things that would also be a crime are going to be examples of hazing under the statute. Okay, so this is not a poll question, but I just kind of want to walk through this with you. So I want to give you an example. So at the beginning of the year, the hockey team, and this is unbeknownst to the coaches, hosts a party, and all of the new players on the hockey team are required to dress up as cheerleaders and perform a cheer in front of the guests and the other members of the hockey team. So what do you think? Is this going to be an issue of hazing? So let's break it down. Does it matter that the coaches don't know about the event? And I'm going to be honest, I've investigated lots of I've been doing this for 25 years. So over that period of time, I've had lots of student investigations in which the student groups or organizations or teams host different types of parties, and there's a theme or there's something that occurs, something like this. It doesn't appear to matter in the statute itself whether the coaches were aware of the event for hazing purposes. Nothing in the definition that we just painstakingly went through says that the behavior needs to be sanctioned by the institution or its employees. It's just got to be, it has to occur. It has to occur. With regard to the second, this question of a risk of physical or psychological injury. So again, having somebody go to a party and perform a cheer, dressing up as a cheerleader, could that cause injury? I think we would need more information. For instance, are they trying to build a pyramid and they're not good at that, or and could have physical injury that results as a result of that? Are they being required to do some sort of, sometimes cheers will have some sort of gymnastics involved in them in which individuals could get hurt. So we do need some more information regarding that. What about the next question? Does it matter if all the new players wanted to participate? Is that where you can say, nope, it's not hazing because we interviewed all of the new players and all the new players on the hockey team want to participate? And I think that the answer to that is that the definition itself says that doesn't excuse this from being hazing if it meets the other requirements of hazing, even if they decide they want to participate, even if change the example to that they have to drink or do something else in those situations. That doesn't excuse the hazing behavior that has happened. And so I think that's really important to understand as well. Would we think of this differently, for example, if this was a male hockey team? We didn't tell you if it was male or female hockey team, and that they were forced to dress up as female cheerleaders and encouraged to get a tattoo or something else that had additional information. And I think, again, we're trying to point these out as scenarios because it's much broader than I think we've looked at some of these hazing situations before. So schools really need to think about situations where students want to participate and in this type of activity, but it is still going to be considered as a hazing activity. And then finally, what happens if one player doesn't want to participate and somebody tries, doesn't coerce and says, okay, you don't have to participate, but you're not really a team, part of the team. I mean, that's what we've heard before. Like, it's not required. You can opt out. You don't have to go, but you're not really going to be one of us. Is that coercion? And at times that is coercion. And so they're being coerced to participate. Now, if they just say, no, this is totally up to you, and there's no consequence or anything associated with this, I think that can be potentially an issue that you want to get more information about, and that, you could try to say that it wasn't psychological in nature. There wasn't a risk of injury or, some sort of psychological injury. What do you think about this one, Ellen? Just, from your perspective about whether or not this could cause a psychological injury?
I think that's a really good question. And I think we all know from working in this environment the way that we do that one person's funny joke is another person's psychological injury. It's going to depend very much on the person affected. And so we need to think about sort of what is a reasonable standard for what is psychological injury. And I don't know that we have an answer. I mean, I liken it to some of the other things in the Clery statute where we talk about psychological injury, and we know that you do not have to seek psychiatric treatment for something to rise to the level of psychological injury. I would try to use a reasonable person standard, but I do feel like in this situation, reasonable minds can differ about what causes psychological injury. Maybe we listen very closely. Maybe it's like in the VAWA statute, when we talk about the victim gets to define the relationship in the context of a dating violence scenario. Maybe in this situation, the victim gets to say, I was psychologically injured because X, Y, and Z. I think it's a great question, and I don't know that we have an answer.
Yeah, I agree, and hopefully we'll get more information. And when new things come along like this, and we don't know the answer, again, internally talk to your colleagues, make sure you have your general counsel's office weigh in on what they think as well, document what you're thinking, and then also you always have the Clery hotline or email that you could send to the Clery group as well, to get additional guidance on some of those things as well. So I'm taking up too much time as always. I guess if you've been on a webinar with me, you know that this is what I do. So I'm going to speed up. So definition, and Ellen and I laughed because we didn't think we'd fill the whole hour, and we're certainly going to fill the whole hour. So the definition of student organization: an organization at an institution in which two or more of its members are students enrolled at the institution, whether or not the organization is established or a recognized organization. So clubs, societies, associations, any athletic teams, clubs, sports teams, fraternities, sororities, bands, student leadership, student government, all of those types of things, of course, are going to be student organizations. But what scares me a little bit when I read it the first time was two or more members at our students in the institution. So this is what I was talking about earlier, and I think it's important to really understand this distinction, is that the statute defines student organizations one way for reporting crime statistics under the ASR. And remember, under the ASR, it's just it's a report. It's a report of hazing that would occur not only to the institution, but also to the Department of Education. But in connection with the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, the statute says that the college or university shall develop a report, and Ellen's going to go into a lot of detail, the CHTR, summarizing the findings concerning any student organization, and that it shall only apply to established and recognized, essentially, or established or recognized by the institution student organizations to be found in violation of the policy. And so again, this portion in red, except this only applies to student organizations that are established or recognized by the institution, applies to the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, which we're going to talk about. It does not apply, though, to the statistics gathered within the ASR. So I think that's going to be really important as you look at these issues. All right, let's go into the next poll question. And the poll question is: a group of first-year students at ABC University has designated itself as the best fan group ever and goes to every home football game. The group puts out the word on social media that any ABC student who moons, and again, shows their bare buttocks for the camera at the kiss cam during the game, will be an honorary member of the best fan group ever. And during the game, 10 students moon the kiss cam. So is this hazing as an initiation under the new statute? A, no, because the best fan group ever is not a student organization. B, no, because the best fan group ever is a student organization under the statute for reporting purposes, but the behavior was not coerced. C, no, because the best fan group ever is a student organization, but the behavior did not put any of the students in the risk of physical or psychological injury, yes, it is going to be hazing if mooning is illegal in your jurisdiction. All right, so let's see. Yeah, got a few of you that have submitted. We'll wait for a couple more. All right, well, we're coming in a few at a time, so I'll just go ahead and go to what she said. So we've got 41%, I think, agree with what Ellen and I think, that yes, this would actually be hazing if mooning is illegal because it's a crime in your jurisdiction. And again, mooning typically in a lot of states is considered to be indecent exposure and is considered to be a crime. So I think, the questions here, number one, again, it doesn't have to be, as we talked about earlier, the best fan group ever doesn't have to be the recognized student organization. It's a group. They are asking individuals to do this to be part of the group. So it's part of the initiation. And simply because they've agreed to do it doesn't mean it's still not hazing under the statute. And I think that's really what's important as well. Even though they voluntarily agreed to do it, it's still under the definitions can be hazing. I mean, this question of physical risk of injury, I think, is the issue that it's a crime. And so that's how it meets the definition, is that because it's a crime, it automatically will meet that definition. Okay, one more example, and then I'll turn it over to Ellen. So this is a local running club that advertises on campus, and 5 first years join the local running club. At the first meeting the students attend, the existing running club members who are not students buy the students a round of drinks. And so I think the whole purpose of this scenario is just to get you to think that there's lots of different student organizations now under this definition. And while this one, I think, is much more removed because it is not students that are putting this on, there could be other ways in which you need to look at your policy and define student organization within your policy so that you don't get caught up in situations that you don't want it to be in those particular areas. I mean, and there's a lot of questions that come on with this. What if the first meeting was on campus? What if they gave alcohol to minors because they weren't, the 5 first years join, they are not likely going to be 21. And so, there's a lot of issues that kind of come on into this analysis as well. All right. Ellen, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you're going to talk about statistical reporting in the ASR.
I sure am. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Haley. So we're going to talk a little bit about statistics and how they work now that we've got this new crime for Clery purposes in the statute. So your existing statistical reporting requirements are the same. So all the other Clery crimes that you've been reporting for statistics for all along, you continue to do that. None of those definitions have changed. What has changed is that the Stop Campus Hazing Act requires that incidents of hazing that are reported to CSAs or local police agencies must be included in the ASR. Someone asked if if the behavior has to be a crime in order for it to be considered hazing. Hazing now is the crime. The underlying behavior does not have to be a crime. It's just, if it is a crime, the statute has said that shows that it has created the risk of injury, if you will. So I hope that none of you all have had a hazing incident reported to you so far this year, but if you have, you need to start counting that, because January 1, 2025 was the date for statistical reporting purposes in your ASR that you needed to start counting your statistics. So like with other Clery crimes, for purpose of the ASR, any hazing incident that occurs anywhere on your Clery geography needs to be included in your ASR. So I point all this out because, as Hayley talked about, we're going to be talking about the Campus Hazing Transparency Report later, and the requirements are different, and we're going to go over those pretty carefully. But this is what you need to know for reporting your statistics for hazing in the ASR. So the question arises, what about multiple incidents of hazing? And the statute says that hazing statistics shall be compiled per each single hazing incident and in accordance with the definition of hazing. And if the same person or persons commit more than one hazing act and the time and place intervals separating each such hazing act are insignificant, such acts shall be reported as a single hazing incident. This is an area where it would be helpful to have some guidance, and I'm not sure that we're going to get it in any official way anytime soon. It sounds like what this is contemplating is a hazing incident that requires students to slam a beer, run across campus naked, and do something else that is not a good idea for them to do. I think what this is saying is that would be counted as one incident of hazing because it's all part of the same set of circumstances, the same set of events. What this doesn't tell us is what happens if an entire fraternity, all the pledge brothers are together causing this behavior. So you've got multiple people committing the act of hazing, or if you have multiple victims of hazing, if you will. Is the incident itself one incident, or if you've got 10 students who were affected, is it 10 incidents? And that's something we're going to dig a little bit more deeply into. Someone has asked a question about what if hazing is alleged but unproven. This is an important question because it shows the distinction between the ASR and the Campus Hazing Transparency Report. Under the ASR, a report of hazing, an allegation of hazing, if it's made to a CSA, if a CSA becomes aware of it, should be reported in your ASR for statistical purposes. The standard is different for the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, and we'll talk about that when we get to that portion of the presentation. What about the daily crime log? So if hazing is already a crime in your jurisdiction, you should have been including it in your daily crime log anyway, because the daily crime log is not limited to Clery crimes, it's all crimes. If your institution has not already been logging hazing incidents in its daily crime log, we recommend doing so now that hazing is considered a criminal offense under the under the Clery Act. So keep that in mind. If you're in a jurisdiction where you have not been counting hazing as a crime, that is something that you will need, campus security, campus police will need to think about and make that change to their record keeping. All right. XYZ, this is a poll question. XYZ University women's basketball team lost a game to the worst team in the conference by 20 points. The coach is furious. At the first practice after the game, the coach says to the players, everyone on this team is going to run line sprints until she throws up. Anyone who doesn't want to participate is free to leave. Just know that if you leave, your days on this team are over. All 12 players start sprinting. 7 of the players end up throwing up. The other 5 nearly do. Is this hazing? And if so, how should it be reported for statistical purposes? So yes, it's hazing and thus doesn't need to be reported. It's hazing and should be reported as one hazing incident. It's hazing and should be reported as 7 hazing incidents because 7 people threw up, or it's hazing and should be reported as 12 incidents of hazing. So I'm going to give you all a few minutes to think about this. This is something we've been talking about a little bit earlier. I'll just give you another minute or so. All right, I'm going to go ahead and advance just in the interest of time. So interesting. Most people say this is hazing and should be reported as one incident of hazing in the ASR. I think there is a very good argument that this is the case. There are some people who might not think that this was over the line in terms of what is expected of a student athlete. I personally do. I think running to the point of throwing up is the risk of physical injury. And I think there's a good argument. Hayley and I talked about this a good bit. I think there's a good argument that this would be considered one incident of hazing, even though you had multiple students involved and you had one coach involved. I don't know. I don't think it would be any different if all the coaches said this. But my inclination is that there is a very good argument that this would be one incident of hazing. I don't think that the right answer is ever going to be that it's reported as 7 incidents, because I think it's an all or nothing kind of situation. It's either all the students were hazed and you've got 12 students, and so it's 12 incidents of hazing, but more likely I think that this would be one incident of hazing. So some practice pointers. So what do you do now with regard to statistical reporting? I say first thing is inform your CSAs, including campus security, campus police, that hazing is now a Clery crime, and provide them with training regarding what hazing is. I also think that your campuses need to start thinking more broadly about what constitutes a student organization, and inform your CSAs about the new understanding for statistical purposes. Keeping in mind, however, that it's not the CSA's responsibility to determine how to log a Clery crime. It's their responsibility to report it to you. Someone asked why I said that it would be one incident of hazing versus 12 in the previous example. That is what I think is a reasonable interpretation of hazing, because it was one incident that affected many people. I can certainly see the argument, however, that it was 12 incidents of hazing, and that's why it would be helpful to have some clarity from the department, but we don't. So we're making a good faith determination of what this is. I'd say for all of these things where we don't have firm guidance, you should obviously talk to your general counsel, but consider reaching out to the department. No matter what you do, make your decisions, make them consistently, and document them. So add a hazing row to your statistical reporting table in your ASR. Someone says, can we wait until October to add the hazing row to the ASR? I mean add the row to your template. I don't mean add the row to your ASR that you published right now. You do not need to publish your ASR hazing statistics until October of 2026. So don't make any changes to your posted ASR now with regard to these collecting hazing statistics. That said, you should be collecting them. So if you're having hazing incidents now, allegations of hazing incidents, you need to start logging them. And then you need to begin including hazing in your daily crime log if you're not already doing so. So that's another thing that you need to be thinking about. All right, now we're going to talk a little about policy statements and programming requirements. And we have gotten some questions in our chat. If we've got time at the end, we'll go back to them. And if we don't, like Hayley said, we'll reach out to you. But I just want to move on because I don't want us to run out of time to cover what we've got so far. So policy statements and programming requirements. Similar to VAWA, the VAWA portions of your ASR, under the Stop Campus Hazing Act, there are requirements now for policy statements that need to be included in your ASR. So these need to be included in your ASR for October 1, 2026. You need a statement of current policies relating to hazing as defined by the institution. So that is your institution's stance on hazing and its definition. Some people might be tempted to include their whole policy in their ASR. That can be pretty clunky, as we've discussed in the context of for example, putting in your whole Title IX policy. You just need to have a statement of what your policies regarding to hazing are. You need information about reporting incidents of hazing. So your campus community needs to be able to look at your ASR and know how to report an incident of hazing. Who do they go to? Do they do it electronically? How does that work? You need a process used to investigate incidents of hazing, and the process needs to be outlined in your ASR. And you need information on applicable local, state, and tribal laws on hazing. That's similar to what we see with regard to some, like the VAWA crimes, for instance, similar to what needs to go into some of your drug and alcohol documentation. So these are all things that schools should be starting to think about now in order to be ready when the time comes. So additional policy statements that you need a statement of policy regarding prevention and awareness programs related to hazing as defined by the institution, and that includes a description of research-informed campus-wide prevention programs designed to reach students, staff, and faculty. Again, this is similar to what we know we have to do for VAWA with regard to the ongoing and primary prevention programming. So the fact that these statements need to be included in your ASR certainly leads me to believe that you ought to have this training. So the training needs to be, like I said, research informed, and it needs to be campus wide. So you need to think about what that means for your campus. Who at your campus might be able to help you come up with that kind of training? And how are you going to get it to, how are you going to spread that information campus wide? And in addition, you need the programming needs to include information about the university's policies, how to report hazing, how it will be investigated, and the relevant laws. And you need to include, the programming needs to include primary prevention strategies intended to stop hazing before it occurs, including bystander intervention. Again, that's the same as under VAWA. Information about ethical leadership. To me, this would be for employees, but also for your student leaders, particularly student leaders who are responsible for student clubs. They need to be given information about how to be a good leader and how to lead in such a way that you don't need to engage in hazing behavior. And then the programming needs to include promotion strategies for building group cohesion without hazing. So these are all things that need to be included in your training. And so schools need to be thinking about what that is going to look like on their campuses. So what to do now? Implementation of this section of the Stop Campus Hazing Act is 6 months after the date of enactment, which is June of this year. And the information applies to your 2026 ASR. This is a little bit confusing, and some people have said, well, maybe the department's really not going to enforce any of this until your 2026 ASR is published. I don't think we can count on that. I think we need to be thinking about being in compliance by June 23rd with regard to having the policy and having the programming. So we think you need to be ensuring that you have a hazing policy that includes the institution's definition of hazing, which is consistent at least with the Stop Campus Hazing Act. It needs to be published before this June date. You need to develop and implement a process for reporting and investigating instances of hazing to make sure all your policies are consistent in this regard. So if you start changing one policy, think about the impact that's going to have on other policies. And you need to begin gathering or asking your council to gather information pertaining to the applicable hazing laws, because that's going to need to be in a document that is available to your students as of June 20, or sorry, not a document necessarily, training that's available to your campus community by June 23rd, 2025. So you need to prepare your hazing training materials, and they need to be aimed at students, faculty, and staff. You need to include this information about bystander intervention, ethical leadership, and how to bond without hazing. And you need to be thinking about how to conduct hazing. Is it going to be, not how to conduct hazing, how to conduct training. Apologies. So think about it. Is that going to be something you're going to be doing at new student and employee orientation? Are you going to do it once a year or twice? Was it going to be all students or all employees, or are you just going to limit it to certain employees, for example? If you limit it to certain employees, is that campus-wide for purposes of the statute? We don't know. Because you're already doing your VAWA training and you're doing it regularly and you're capturing your new students and your transfer students, all things, think about that. That might be a way for your campus to ensure compliance, to roll it into that already required training. And then think about who at your institution is going to be responsible for it, who's going to keep track of who's been trained and what the training looks like. These are all things we need to be thinking about. Now we're going to talk about the Campus Hazing Transparency Report. Note that this is different and in addition to your ASR. So the Campus Hazing Transparency Report is a document that summarizes the findings concerning any established or recognized student organization found to be in violation of the institution's standard of conduct related to hazing. Note that this is different from the ASR standard. These are findings, not just reports. Also, the Campus Hazing Transparency Report only applies to established or recognized student organizations. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure what established means versus recognized. The fact that the drafters of this statute used both makes me think they meant them to mean different things, but we don't know exactly what that means. The report must include, and this is the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, must include the name of the student organization that was found to be in violation of your school's policy, but no personally identifying information. So this is not about naming names and punishing particular students. It's about organizational reputation, I think, for the institution and for the student organization. You need a general description of the violation, including whether it involved the abuse of drugs or the illegal use of alcohol or drugs. The report needs to include the findings, any sanctions, and the date the incident occurred, the date the investigation was started, the date the investigation ended, and the date that notice was sent to the student organization that the incident resulted in a violation. It may also include information determined necessary by the institution and required by state law. It can include a description of the purposes of and differences between the ASR and the Campus Hazing Transparency Report. Clearly, they don't want they don't want the reader to be confused about what document that they're reading. So, note, Campus Hazing Transparency Report for geography, the definition of campus does not apply. So, campus, for purposes of the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, is not limited to your Clery geography when it's used in the title of this report. And it seems that hazing incidents that occur anywhere pertaining to a student organization are to be included in the Campus Hazing Transparency Report. So we've got another poll question. The Sigma Delta Kappa fraternity has been a fraternity at HEH University for years. Recently, it was kicked off campus for violating a variety of campus ordinances, but everyone knows that the group still exists. During a secret rush event at the off-campus apartment of 8 of the brothers, including the chapter president, all the pledges were locked in a bathroom together and forced to stand in a bathtub filled with ice for 3 hours. HEH University conducted an investigation and found the fraternity to have violated the university's hazing policy. Should this incident be reported, and if so, where? Yes, it should be reported in the ASR and in the Campus Hazing Transparency Report. Yes, this incident should be reported in the ASR, but not in the Campus Hazing Transparency Report. Yes, this incident should be reported in the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, but not in the ASR. Or no, this incident does not need to be reported in either the ASR or the Campus Hazing Transparency Report. And I'm going to give you all a few minutes to answer. Okay, just in the interest of time, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Most people say this is an incident that should be, most people say it should be in the ASR and this Campus Hazing Transparency Report. The second highest number is the incident should be reported in the CHTR, but not the ASR. My thinking is that this needs to be included in the Campus Hazing Transparency Report, but not in the ASR because it happened at an off-campus apartment. Now, I should have been a little bit clearer. I intended that to mean an off-campus department that is not a part of the institution's Clery geography. If you interpreted that to mean that it was on the universities or colleges' Clery geography, then absolutely it should be in the ASR and in the Campus Hazing Transparency Report. So, note, the Transparency Report will include findings pertaining to the organizations, not the individuals, and only findings pertaining to hazing incidents involving an established or recognized student organization are included in the CHTR. So that's a narrower universe of organizations than the ASR. It's not exactly clear what it means to be an established student organization as distinct from a recognized student organization. One of the issues with that fraternity having been kicked off campus, I was trying to get people to think about, it's no longer recognized by the university, but the university knows that it exists. They know about this secret rush. So is it established? It's hard to know. It's just something to think about. The transparency report must be put in a prominent location on the institution's website and must include a statement of the availability of statistics on hazing in the ASR and a link to the ASR. So keep that in mind. Your Campus Hazing Transparency Report needs to have a link to your ASR. It needs to include information about the institution's hazing policies relating to reporting and investigating allegations of hazing, and it needs the applicable laws. And it must be updated twice a year. Now, I should say it's important to know you do not need to publish a Campus Hazing Transparency Report if you have not had any findings of hazing. You also don't need to update an already existing report, Campus Hazing Transparency Report, if you have not had any additional findings of hazing in the intervening window of time. So institutions must begin collecting information regarding hazing incidents for inclusion in the CHTR beginning July 1 of 2025. So you've got a little bit of time. I think what this does is allows you to draft a policy and run through your process, if you haven't already, in order to have a finding to report in your Campus Hazing Transparency Report. Your Campus Hazing Transparency Report must be publicly available on your website in a prominent place no later than December of this year. And again, you're not required to develop a report until you've got a finding of hazing and you don't have to update it. Someone has asked about, do the findings recorded stay on the subsequent updated reports for 5 years or fall off for each 6 month update? I'm going to talk about that a little bit in a second. My gut is you keep them for 5 years. I'm not 100% sure that's what the statute intends, but I think that's the safest route based on the language. So things to do now: create a template transparency report that includes what you need to include, and consider also including information regarding how it differs from the ASR. And I see we're really pushing time. This is just a sample table that you all will have in your program materials. Differences to note: the annual security. Oh, sorry. This is Hayley. I apologize. Hayley, turning it back to you.
Oh, no problem, Ellen. We might go a couple minutes over if you can stay on. If you can't, we understand. But some of the differences, again, when it comes to the ASR, it's limited to your Clery geography and it's reports of hazing. There's a broader definition, as we talked about, of student organizations. It's not just the recognized or established language like we've seen with the CHTR. And it must include the policy statements. So let's just break it down. So I think Erica put a good question. The statistics you've got to start keeping now, but that's not for publication until October 1st of 2026. The policy statements are due in the ASR. We're supposed to have the policies done by June. So that means that this year, the October 1st, 2025 ASR must include the new definitions and policy statements regarding hazing, just to break it down of what's required within the ASR. All right. The Campus Hazing Transparency Report, there's no limits regarding geography like there is in the ASR. You must include information pertaining to findings of hazing, and again, of applies only to recognized or established student organizations and must include policy statements regarding reporting, investigating, and allegations of hazing, as well as state, federal, local laws, those types of things. Must be updated twice a year, and then we have maintain in those records as well. Some people are having trouble getting their training, this materials. We're going to make sure they get sent out as well. The questions, what should you be doing right now? Start logging your hazing reports as of January 1st. Begin figuring out what your training is going to look like. Start writing and revising your hazing policies and procedures so that you're ready to go. And again, communicate with student organizations regarding these new policies and state and requirements, and then create a template, as Ellen said. I think that's going to be really important so that you're not caught flat-footed if you have a finding of a hazing incident that's occurred and you need to get your Campus Hazing Transparency Report up quickly. So those are our recommendations in terms of what to do. Again, as I say, every time I talk about Clery, it's got to have institutional buy-in, and it's going to be very difficult with these broad definitions if you don't have institutional buy-in, because this affects all aspects of your campus in which students are together in different ways, and including athletics. So we've got to make sure we have a buy-in. We've got to make sure we have very clear communication, a coordinated approach, making sure that you have this commitment to compliance through your thoughtful decision making, and document those decisions, as Ellen talked about as well. So we do have some upcoming demos when it comes to, we have a Clery compliance tool set, which will include all of the information regarding hazing as well, to help schools with it. If you have interest in learning more about that, you're welcome to join our free demo. It's about 20 to 30 minutes in length, just to show you the product. No worries if you're not interested as well. For those of you who we didn't get to, well, the last question that came in, for those of you who can stay on, is a question regarding the hierarchy rule. And it's funny you asked this, because Ellen and I are debating this yesterday as we were getting ready for this webinar. And our answer is that the hierarchy rule is not listed within the rule in terms of as hazing being part of the actual definition. And so we think, based on statutory interpretation of two lawyers who are not your lawyers potentially, so make sure you ask your lawyers, but we don't think the hierarchy rule is going to apply. And we do know that there's going to be other crimes that are committed when hazing is committed as well, but because the hierarchy rule actually no longer exists for the FBI or in other contexts, there is no hierarchy rule. It really only exists in the Clery context, and hazing is not part of that rule. We would err on the side of not including it within the hierarchy, and so always reporting hazing incidents. Ellen, anything you want to add there? I just thought it was interesting that she asked the exact same question that we talked about.
I meant to mention that, so no, that's exactly what I would have said. So thank you for raising the question.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, again, we didn't get to all these questions, but we're happy to, we'll follow up with you after this. I do really want to thank you for joining us today. This is new. We understand there's a lot of information here. Hopefully you're able to get the slides, and tomorrow you'll get the recording as well. As a reminder, this program has been approved for continuing legal education hours. And so hopefully go on your CEU icon at the bottom of the screen. If for some reason that's not working, I saw that in the text chat too, feel free to send me an email or Ellen, and I'll make sure that you get the information as well. And you will get a certificate of attendance tomorrow as well that will be emailed to you along with the webinar recording. We would love for you to complete a short survey if you have time. We're sorry it went long, but there's a lot of information to include. And then if you're interested in, again, in registering for our upcoming Clery compliance tool set, it will be held on January 23rd. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your attendance today and staying on a couple minutes after 1 o'clock Central Time too. So really appreciate it. Have a wonderful afternoon.